that really great job because it was written for me, right? Or I was financially tested because it was written for me. And so a lot of times, for me, the question just comes down to faith. That I have to submit, that this is my calling, right? Like I have to speak up for the oppressed because I'm a US citizen, because I have food security, because they can't deport me anywhere, because I speak English, because I have the privilege of a University of California education. I have to do those things. Those are my spiritual obligations. Those are my ethical obligations. Like that's what I'm going to be honest about. And if I'm meant to get hurt, my clumsy self is going to fall over my ankles right here and trip on my face, right? But if I'm not, then it doesn't matter who comes here to harm me or who comes here to record me or who comes here to chastise me. I'm going to walk out of here just fine. Our faith is a journey, not a destination. And so sometimes people look at activists and they think, oh, she gets it. Like she's not afraid, right? Or like they look at a scholar and they go, he's perfect, he's not gonna screw up, right? Like, and they look at these things and they assume that we've got it figured out. And I'll tell you that we're working on it, that all of us are working on it. Because in that moment when I was confronted by those guards, I was afraid. And I would say that if I had like reached some perfect place of faith, I'd be like, bring it, I'm not afraid, right? I'm not afraid when I go through Customs and Border Protection at the airport. But when I'm standing there on the beach, when I'm kneeling there on the beach, on my knees, and I'm thinking, I sing this interfaith song, do I like sit here and read Ayatul Kursi? Like, what do I do? And how will I explain to my mom and the Rishta auntie, because some of you have to deal with Rishta aunties, right? And why my face got smashed in. I haven't like figured it out entirely. It's a process. And so know that when you are scared, know that when you are hesitant, know that when you are worried, that all of those things are things that a lot of your leaders and activists and teachers also experience. Other questions? Brothers, you gonna let the sister show you up? You know what we're gonna say, right? We're gonna say they didn't ask her a question because she's a sister speaker. Yes, thank you.
So I wanted to ask you about something that you didn't address too much.
Please.
It's coming from my own perspective, so I don't want to speak for anyone else or other Muslims. But for me, on a day-to-day basis, the kind of oppression or the kind of like, I don't know, maybe Islamophobia that I experience doesn't really come from like, me walking in the street or someone finding out I'm Muslim and then saying something bad.
Right.
I'm not saying I haven't experienced that. I have in other places, but not here in California that much. But for me, I feel like the source of a lot of the oppression that I feel is actually, unfortunately, comes from the actions of other Muslims. So, for example, or a confusion, like people assume, okay, there's oppression in Syria because they're Muslim, or oppression here, or even kind of addressing the elephant in the room, like you look at what happened in Sri Lanka, and to me, I'm like, oh my God, like people who say they're Muslims did this. Obviously, what they did is completely un-Islamic, but then I have to ask myself, oh my God, okay, I'm going to go out tomorrow. Are people going to think about me differently because people who say they're Muslim, why they did this? So I don't know how to confront that as a Muslim, especially when I'm discussing with other people. And I do appreciate it because you did bring that up. And I think that's where a lot of critics try and attack us from, and I think they're very confused. They think, well, we support terrorists, we support Hamas because we're Muslim, we support Muslim Brotherhood. I don't know, it seems like some of the people here are confused. They think we're Muslim Brotherhood. We're not affiliated with any organizations or anything like that, but how can we say, like, look, you're misunderstanding. We're Muslims, get to know us. Like, that's different. That's not us.
Can I ask you a question?
Shoot.
How old are you?
I'm 21.
Okay. So I think I've been condemning terrorism for about 19 years. And I'm not making light of your age. Like I'm actually like I'm learning, so I'm curious, right? And there's this like tension that I have, right? Because there are people who are older than both of us who've been condemning terrorism for longer. And so we run into this like, am I like a condemnation vending machine, right? Like am I just supposed to condemn? And I really appreciated something someone said recently about another Muslim leader. They said, oh, she didn't condemn, blah, blah, blah. And it was like the fact that you require her to condemn is more telling of you than of her, right? Because we should assume good of each other, which is that all people condemn all acts of violence. And so I'm at a place where I'm exhausted of condemnations. And I think for those of you that are younger than me, maybe you're not quite yet. And that's great, because we definitely need people writing those condemnations, because there seem to be some people in this room and otherwise, right, who have not heard that Muslims condemn all acts of violence, that our religion prohibits acts of violence against innocent people. And I take for granted that the MSU students know that because I know you do, but sometimes our guests don't, right? Islam condemns all acts of violence. Islam prohibits all acts of violence. The majority of Muslims in the world have condemned all acts of terror. That in the rules of engagement in Islam, we are not allowed to harm women, we are not allowed to harm children, we are not allowed to harm non-combatants. Remember, do you guys know that you're not allowed to burn trees? Like we are not allowed to engage in scorched earth, which is like a very American war strategy, right? Like we can't do Shangri-La, we can't do scorched earth, we can't do like hellfire, like any of that, right? Like those are not things that we are allowed to do. And we are only allowed to commit as much harm, right, or as much violence as is done to us. And we can only do it in defense. So when people say Islam is a religion of peace, I'm like, no, Islam is a way of life that includes guidance on self-defense, right? And there are very strong rules about self-defense, right? But I would say that I oppose the Iraq War, I oppose the Afghanistan War, I oppose what happened in Sri Lanka, I oppose the 9/11 terror attacks. And so the challenge for us as Muslims is, do we keep condemning acts over and over again? And I think there's value in that, because again, there are some people who haven't read them, right? But I would say that the more important thing for me is to say, how do we build a society that we want to build, right? How do we build something that we can get excited about? And when I think of my complicity in oppression, right, I'm actually feeling more connected to my complicity in the prison industrial complex and the military industrial complex than I am to anything that happened in Sri Lanka. My heart hurts for what happened in Sri Lanka because my heart hurts as a human being, but I had nothing to do with it. But did you know that in the last 5 years in California, police officers have killed nearly 1,000 unarmed Black people? And only 2 of them have faced criminal charges over it. I would spend more time in jail if I got into a fight outside this room, where no one was injured, than a police officer does for killing an unarmed Black person. And so, I wish I could say that I had a clear answer to this one also, right? And it's to say, I think we have to acknowledge that there are people who claim our faith and use that violently, right? I think it might be simplistic to say it's entirely about faith. A lot of times it's about politics, it's about power, in the same way that it is about other faiths. There is something to be said about continuing to issue condemnations. For those of you that are on CARE's listserv, it's actually the young people that get most mad at us for the continued condemnations. They're like, yo, we get it, you've been doing it for 25 years, right? And we will continue to do it, so that should there be any doubt among any of our friends, neighbors, guests, etc., that we condemn terrorism, we'll do it again for the record, right? One of our old colleagues actually had a compiled list of all of our condemnations of terrorism dating back to the 90s. But I also don't want us to think that we are going to convince the people that are asking for those condemnations by issuing a condemnation, right? Again, anyone here who had time to print a pamphlet about some false connection between me and my organization to an international organization that I've never interacted with has access to Google and could have Googled CARE condemns and found all of these things, right? And so I'm worried that it's a futile strategy, but one that we do as part of the reality that we're in. Part of me used to say I wait for the day that we ask white men to condemn acts of terror committed by white men. I have not seen a white men's group issue a condemnation for the white man and his violence in San Diego this past weekend. But I don't wish that anymore, because I, in the same way that I don't want to be held guilty by association and I don't want to be racially or religiously profiled, I would not wish that on those who seek it from me. Yes?
I have a question. A lot of us get exposed to activism first in college, coming in from high school or anything. So I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on keeping that up, post graduation when you're no longer on?
So I cut my teeth as an activist on my college campus, right? Growing up, we went to the masjid 6 days a week. No, Saturdays, sometimes we got the night off, but we went Monday through Thursday for Quran class, Friday for a community event, and Sunday for Sunday school. And I learned Islam as a call to justice. I learned Islam as pray 5 times a day. I learned Islam as challenge the status quo and be empowering, but I never had a way to put that to work until I got to college. And then I got to college and I got involved with MSA. I got involved with MSA West and student government and the campus progressives and voter registration, all these different things. And then I left college and I was really busy, right? And so I remember a few things that stuck to me when I was in college. The first was that you have more time now than you ever will, right? And so college is boot camp for activism in addition addition to so many other things, right? Like if you take your papers seriously, your work product will be better in the workplace when you leave college. If you take your protest organizing seriously, you will keep doing it when you leave college, right? If you take your prayers in Ramadan seriously, you will keep praying. And so, one, they said that you have more time now than you ever will use it. Like make sure that you're putting it to work, and you all know this, right? Like my mom ingrained it in me is that we are accountable for every minute that we are here. Every minute that you watch Game of Thrones is a minute that you are not getting back. And no, that is not an endorsement. I pride myself on never having watched it. But every minute that you watch that, or Scandal, or How to Get Away with Murder, or whatever like stuff we're watching these days, right, is a minute that we will never get back. And you think you're really busy right now because you're managing like 15, 18 units, you've got finals or midterms, and then you've got work. It just gets busier after you leave here, right? So make use of every minute that you have here as an opportunity for training. The second thing that was said to us is that our obligation doesn't end when we leave here, right? It's not like oppression ends when we leave here. And so still we see that Muslim students struggle once they leave campuses. That they're like, I don't feel like I have time for this anymore. I don't have time to go to masjid. I don't have time for activism. I have to pay my bills. Like my mom expects me to chip in. Now my mom wants me to get married. Now I'm married. I've got to pay for all that, right? Like there's like all these things that happen around that. Or I'm just trying to get ahead at work. Maybe I'm not married. I'm just trying to succeed in the workplace. How am I supposed to do that? Post 9/11, a lot of Muslims had conversations about, we have too many doctors and engineers. We need like teachers and social workers and all those things. And I think that we've come full circle from that conversation. Some of you will go into biology, some of you will go into CS, and some of you will be social workers, right? Some of you will do a variety of things. And so what I tell Muslim students about activism is, my unorganized way of saying it, one, what I've already told you, stay involved with at least one Muslim group and one broader community group, right? And that obligation continues past college. So get involved in your masjid, get involved in care, ikna, mass, whatever it is, and one other thing, right? Find what you are passionate about, and that's true for your career, but also your activism. You don't all have to come be care directors. Frankly, we don't have enough jobs for all of you, right? Like, we have some jobs, but not enough for everyone. So you don't all have to come be care directors. Some of you can be environmental justice activists. Some of you can do Doctors Without Borders. Some of you can be at Amazon, helping them rework their facial recognition technology, right? Like, there's a lot of things that you can do that may not look like what I do, but are still like your way of moving your career towards activism. And then the third thing I would say is to surround yourself with friends who encourage that. So my closest friends today, right, are on mosque boards, right, are involved with mass, work for Islamic Relief and other organizations, work for Empower Change. Those are the people that I work and socialize with. Because you know what, when I'm slacking, one, they understand that I'm tired from what's going on, right? And they know the care that I need. But two, when I want to strategize, guess who I go to? Right? So it actually becomes a part of my well-being, it becomes a part of my life. It's easier said than done, and I think that last one for me is the most important one, is to continue to surround myself with people, particularly the people that I met in MSA and MSU, who are interested in the same things, who are going to continue to give their work, to give their life and their work to this. Any other questions? Yes.
So I don't know if like other students have this problem, but like how would you like recommend like dealing with parents who like don't understand like the work like you do, like so like I understand like there's fear or like, oh, why are you going out and doing this? Because like, yeah, I'm on disciplinary measures and my parents don't know that to this day, if you don't know that.
You just said it on camera.
Yeah. But I'm probably gonna watch that. But anyways, so like how do I like bring it up to them or be like, oh, like this work is important, and like how do I like talk about it basically with them? Like, do you have any recommendations?
Be very, very patient with your parents, right? So like as Muslims, we believe that we have to respect our parents, that we have to listen to them. And I never want your activism to be the source of a fight with them. That's not to say it won't happen, right? Yeah, it's happened before because I've lived that experience, right? I'm like, Beta, do you really need to go to this protest again? Beta, do you need to take this job? Like, did we really send you to school to like get paid that amount of money, right? Like, those conversations, Beta, is that really safe? What will people say? There's a lot of that, and girls get it, and boys get it, and like everyone gets it, right? But honestly, like the thing that I can tell you that's most important is to be patient with them, right? To remember, to always remember that our parents want what is best for us, right? They birthed us into this world, they raised us, they poured their savings into getting us our college educations. They are not saying what they are saying out of an intention to punish us, penalize us, restrict us, right? They're saying what they're saying because they're worried about our safety. Particularly for parents who are who are themselves immigrants, right? Like their experience, both where they came from and then here is very different than ours, right? And so be patient with them, share with them what you can. You don't need to share the scary stuff with them, right? Like, but share the good stuff with them, share the opportunities with them. And sometimes what that means is inviting them to things, right? Like once in a while, like I will like ask my parents to come to a protest. One of the most exciting things that happened a couple of years ago is that my parents came to Muslim Day at the Capitol, right? And they're like in their 60s, and they drove up to like the Bay Area. They spent the night with me, and then they took their own car to Muslim Day at the Capitol, and then they went home, right? But like they got to see firsthand what we were doing, and that it wasn't all scary. And so, be patient with them, share information with them, right? Invite them along so they can see it. Sometimes even seeing other parents at these things can be really helpful for them, right? And then the last thing is like navigate disagreements very carefully, right? Like again, like no protest merits ending a relationship with my mom or yelling at my mom, right? And so there I have to make those decisions very strategically, is that if this is going to get in the way of the relationship, then like what are my short-term goals and what are my long-term goals, right? My long-term goals are to be in good relationship with my family and to ensure that my family is as much activist involved as I am, right? This one protest can wait. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy or that there aren't going to be fights. Those things will absolutely happen, but I would never, I remind myself and others that as Muslim activists that we have to carry ourselves with like a certain degree of like respect, right? And a certain degree of decorum. And that we have to be living our Islam, not just as we're walking down the protest streets, but also in our interactions with people, including our parents. You want to ask questions? Yes.
So you recommended that we are a part of a Muslim organization and then a broader organization. So I was wondering how we if we're working with a non-Muslim organization in protests or just like organizing, how do we reconcile that they might not they won't have Islamic values, so we might differ on some things, or how do we reconcile that?
Honestly, so the question for those who may not have heard it is sometimes when we're working outside the community, our values are called into conflict. The reality is like sometimes I'm in Muslim spaces and my values are called into conflict, right? Like I've been in masajid where they're like, let's go get all of our supplies at Walmart, right? Or they don't pay their workers well, or they're doing things that I'm like, hey, like I don't know, like a really sort of interesting tension that's come up in recent months has been as hate crimes increase, the standard protocol in a lot of immigrant Muslim communities is to call the cops for increased patrols, right? But like for my black brothers and sisters, like that's not a safe thing. For my undocumented brothers and sisters, that's not a safe thing. And so how do we reconcile those things, right? And so when I think of like the tensions that I face, I actually don't think that we just face them outside of the Muslim community. And so inside the Muslim community or outside the Muslim community, I would say that it's important that we have certain boundaries, right? So for me, a boundary is that I will not engage in faith washing of apartheid, right? I will always listen to someone who is complaining of sexual assault